Causing an echo. I'm sorry.
That's great.
Let's see. Cecilia, can you mute Michelle? Okay, there you go. Now, voice test, echo, echo, echo. Okay, no echo anymore. Yeah, Michelle, I'm sorry. There's like some issue with your line. But don't worry, this will be still a fantastic experience for you.
Hey, Dan.
Oh, hey,
Refried.
it's refried. Hey, refried.
Hey,
Refried.
yeah, I'm really excited. I'm so excited to meet Melody. Melody, I read your book, Haldol and Hyacinths, a long time ago. And it's awesome to meet you. So
Nice
excited.
to meet you too.
Oh my God, that's so amazing. Hello. Who else who didn't we say hello to, Cecilia?
Um, let's see. Well, since I went to grab my smoothie, we didn't
Oh,
say hi.
that's
Did we
right.
say hello to Martha?
Oh,
Welcome,
hi, Martha. Welcome, welcome.
Tiffany, how are you?
Why
Welcome,
does it
Melody.
say the
Thank you so
content
much for
of
being
this
here.
meeting is being sent to a third party?
Oh, yes, this is being live streamed. So this is being live streamed to YouTube and Facebook. I don't know about any third parties. All right.
I'm happy with that happening. If some of you feel uncomfortable asking certain questions, if you don't want to do it, you're welcome to do that. I fully consent to y'all using me, but I don't know how the rest of y'all feel. So with it being a small group, whatever is what y'all feel most comfortable with. And I imagine you can send Dan questions if you don't feel comfortable asking them yourself, as well, right, Dan?
Yes, Melody, of course.
So everyone feels, comfortable.
Yeah.
Melanie, where are you located?
I'm in Tallahassee, Florida.
Oh,
How
okay.
about you? How about you,
New
James?
York, New York, the Big Apple.
New York, New York. Are all of y'all in New York?
Most of
No,
us.
no, there's people from all over the country here. Yeah.
Martha, where are you from? And Refried, where are you from?
I'm in California. I'm in Southern California in Riverside, so it's about
Okay.
an hour outside of LA.
Oh, nice. Nice. Are you doing all right post fires and everything?
Yeah, an hour outside of LA, we're really inland, and we're not even getting the smoke.
Okay. Okay. That's good to know. My parents live in San Diego and I have a lot of friends in LA, so it's been quite a time.
I live in New York. Melody, my parents went to Emory. I just saw that on your description. That's
Okay,
very
you're kidding. Small world.
And we have Michelle. Hello, Michelle.
Hello, Michelle.
Oh, wait, Michelle. Oh, there. I forgot.
Hello.
Because when I didn't see your image, I was like, oh, this must be a new person. But you're with us the
No,
whole
it's
time.
me.
How you doing, Michelle?
Time, Michelle. Where
Good.
are you?
This is my first time here.
Okay. Where are you?
Colorado.
Hence the mountain time. Okay.
And you guys,
Yeah, it's
there's
9:30.
okay. There's some glorious links in the chat. We're gonna start in 60 seconds, Melody, and
Good.
I will open up. I will introduce you, and then you can go from there. All right. Let's see. Beautiful. Hello and welcome to a very special Saturday spirituality group. We have Melody Moezzi. Melody is a writer, speaker, attorney, activist, and award-winning author known for her work on mental health, inclusion, disability rights, and Islam in America. She is the author of the Rumi Prescription, winner of the 2021 Wilbur Award, as well as the acclaimed memoirs, as well as the acclaimed memoirs Haldol and Hyacinths. which one of us has already read, and War on Error. Her essays have appeared in the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Guardian, among others. Moezzi has taught creative writing. Melody has taught creative writing, worked in interfaith advocacy, consulted for nonprofits, and held roles with Homeland Security and the Carter Center. She holds degrees from Wesleyan University, Emory University School of Law, and Emory's Rollins School of Public Health. She lives in the American South with her husband and 2 cats. Melody, please take it away.
Thank you so much for having me and taking the picture off. I appreciate it. I'm really excited to talk to y'all and learn more about where y'all are coming from. I am happy to introduce myself further. If you have any questions, Dan and I talked about this being more of a Q&A kind of experience. So obviously, I want this to go in the direction that y'all want it to go in. And I can't do that unless I know who you are. I'm hoping that introduction is sufficient. I'm fully prepared. For those of you who might not be that familiar with my work, I was thinking of reading, and we can vote on this if y'all want to hear me read. I'm dyslexic, so I'll warn you in advance. But I have an essay that I wrote for the New York Times that's adapted from my latest book, which is The Rumi Prescription, which is about learning Persian poetry from my dad. And the subtitle is How an Ancient Mystic Poet Changed My Modern Manic Life. And I think that's the title the New York Times used for that article. And it's short. So I thought if I read that, we could sort of be on the same page in terms of spirituality and where I'm coming from. And then we can open the floor. And that should only take a few minutes. And then we can open the floor for discussion and questions and stuff like that. How does that sound?
That sounds amazing, Melody. Yay.
Perfect. And if any of you want to go to follow along and read with me, I will go ahead and post the link to the Times piece. There you go. So yes, How a Persian Mystic Poet Changed My Life is the title they used. 5 years ago, in an act of creative desperation, I decided to immerse myself in the classical, and by the way, 5 years ago is 10 years ago. This is 2020. This was published and my book came out around March 2020. So 10 years ago. In an act of creative desperation, I decided to immerse myself in the classical Persian poetry I grew up taking for granted. I aimed to learn it by heart and under the expert tutelage of my father, a physician by trade and a connoisseur of Sufi poetry by tradition. For my father, nothing is more sacred than poetry, specifically the mystical poetry of Rumi. Jalaluddin Muhammad Rumi, known as Maulana, an honorific meaning our master, to his fellow Persians like my father and me, was a renowned 13th century Islamic scholar, theologian, poet, and mystic. Born in what is now Afghanistan in 1207, Rumi grew up in an era of deep political turmoil, packed with modern parallels, full of walls and bans and wars. As a result, he spent much of his life traveling extensively throughout the Middle East before settling in Konya or Konya, depending on how you want to say it, in present-day Turkey, then central Anatolia, formerly part of the Eastern Roman Empire. This accounts for the name Rumi, meaning Roman in Persian or Arabic. Sorry, Persian and Arabic. My father, who grew up in Iran, recites Rumi's verse with the same fervor and frequency most people reserve for food and oxygen. By all accounts, he is a tried and true Rumi addict. But like most children of addicts, I grew up resenting the object of my father's addiction. An inescapable presence in our Ohio home. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio. Rumi was the annoying elder who forever tested the limits of my Persian hospitality, challenging my limited Farsi with his antiquated medieval verse and dismissing my American hunger for brevity with his seemingly endless collections of rhyming couplets and quatrains. But all my childhood resentment of Rumi dissolved after I lost my mind and found solace in his verse. Soon, Rumi's poetry became a lifeline, allowing me to survive both my own personal insanity and the political insanity to come. My manic, psychotic break from the rest of the world's notion of reality was clinical and terrifying, but it started out soulful and electrifying. For a brief moment before the hallucinations, delusions, restraints, seclusion, and hospitalization that ensued, an intense calm washed over me. Standing on my Atlanta balcony, watching the sun rise over Stone Mountain, I felt a deep connection to every atom, back to Adam and before, and to the divine spirit within each one of those atoms.
Can
However,
I ask a question?
however clumsily, I had stumbled into the land of mystics, the land of my father, the land of Rumi. At long last, I was beginning to understand this poetry that had spoken to my father since he was a child in Shiraz. For what modern medicine lacked by way of explanation, Rumi provided through my father's voice, visiting me on the locked psychiatric unit of the same hospital where he had performed thousands of surgeries and delivered hundreds of babies. And this is a couplet from Rumi. In love with insanity, I'm fed up with wisdom and rationality. And to just give you the sense of the musicality in Persian, it's عاشقم من بر فن دیوانگی سیرم از فرهنگی و فرزانگی. So he literally says, I'm full, like I'm fed up with I'm in love with the profession of insanity, and I'm full and fed up with wisdom and rationality and culture. While Rumi considers insanity a mark of divine favor, he distinguishes between types. The madness he promotes is rooted in ecstatic love. The one he condemns in petty fear. The former creates a mystic, the latter a lunatic. When I first began studying Rumi with my father in late 2014, years after that psychiatric hospitalization, properly diagnosed and medicated for bipolar disorder and in recovery, I never expected that within a few short years, my extended family in Iran would be barred from visiting us in the United States. Nor did I ever expect that our country would become so deeply divided. But here we are, more isolated than ever. And as an Iranian-American Muslim feminist living with a mental health condition, I feel the weight of this isolation every day. And I wish that had changed since 2020, but sadly it hasn't now. Heavy with fears warped wisdom and rationality, crazier than anything mania ever induced in me. This weight is a reminder that clinical psychosis, even absent any mystical tendency, seems sensible compared with our current political reality. Thankfully, as a student of my father and Rumi, I have learned how to counter the toll of this weight. In Rumi's words, and this is another couplet from him, become the sky and clouds that create the rain, not the gutter that carries it to the drain. Of course, it's easier to be the gutter than the sky, to imitate rather than to create. But imitation builds cults, not communities. It may seem counterintuitive, but true community demands originality, not conformity. I know this firsthand because every time I write something new, it helps me feel less alone, reminding me that we are all inextricably linked to and through a sacred spark within each of us. It seems so obvious, but it's also painfully easy to forget how deeply connected we are. More than any other factor, it's ego that makes us forget, filling us with a sense of superiority. This false feeling of being somehow better than our fellow human beings allows us to forget the common source of our humanity, and thus to disconnect from the divinity within ourselves and one another. This is why, for Rumi, ego is not only the worst of our natural and inescapable human afflictions, but also the root of them all. His solution, and this is him again, another couplet from him, quit keeping score if you want to be free. Love has ejected the referee. Indeed, when it comes to the prison of our own ego, love is our only ticket out. When I first flew across the country to study Rumi's poetry with my father, I did so brimming with hubris and ambition. I set aside a month to learn this poetry, perfect my rudimentary Farsi, overcome a brutal case of writer's block, and then research and ideally write a book about it. Naturally, nothing went according to plan. Still, through all of it, I had my father to guide me and remind me that it didn't matter how long it took to write this imagined book. What mattered was that I approached my poetic pilgrimage with patience and humility, recognizing every hardship as an invitation to step out of fear and into love in my own life. And this is Rumi again. Every storm the beloved unfurls permits the sea to scatter pearls. For as long as I can remember, my father has been scribbling these and other poems on his old prescription pads, signing them as though they were for any ordinary pharmaceutical and leaving them like pearls at my feet. For decades, I failed to fill them, too distracted and distraught by the struggles along the way to notice the treasures lighting my path. But today, As the faith and ancestry I share with my father and Rumi have made me more of a target, more hated and unwelcome in my own home than ever before, I am grateful for this treasure trove of poetic prescriptions. Now I have a documented reservoir of timeless teachings from my own faith and culture that transcend both. Now I claim my inheritance, I fill my prescriptions, and I pass them along. So this is me trying to pass some of those along to y'all. Thanks again for having me, and the floor is open. Any questions you have related to that or anything else, I'm open to them.
All right. Now, Chaplain James, now is the time, Chaplain James.
Now is the time. Okay.
Now or never.
Melody, I want to ask what caused your affliction and how are you dealing with it now?
What caused my affliction? What a question. Yeah. I just noticed the chat and that I had sent that as a direct message to Chaplain James instead of to the whole crew. So I just sent the link to everyone. Cause is a funny thing. Etiology is not something I specialize in, but I don't know. I can't tell you exactly what caused it. I could say it's partly genetics, it's partly environment. I think if 9/11 hadn't happened, if I didn't start becoming the kind of target that I felt like I started becoming in this country, if it didn't go politically in the direction that it did, I'm not sure that would have happened to me. Also, because in terms of my family, it's not as I know a lot of people are like, oh, bipolar doesn't just run in my family, it gallops. It does not gallop in my family. It's not, I'm a bit of an exception. We certainly have like lots of mental health conditions, but bipolar was not one of them, at least not specifically. I also think for sure, in addition to the political reality of being a Muslim in America, there was also the medical reality of I had a pancreatic tumor that nearly killed me as a teenager. And in order to remove that tumor, they had to reroute my intestines and do a 9-hour surgery. And turns out a lot of the serotonin in your body originates in the intestines. There's a huge, people have written entire books on this just in terms of the gut-brain connection. And I think I am a bit of a casualty of that as well. But as much as I say casualty, all of this for me turned out very much for the best. And that's a hard thing to say for something that at the time felt like the most horrible thing that had ever happened to me. I felt like I'd lost every ounce of credibility I'd ever had. I felt like I would never do anything useful again in my life. I felt like I'd lost all purpose. So yeah, so to say that something good came out of it, absolutely something good came out of it. It took time, it took patience that I absolutely didn't have at the time. And I'm still very bad at patience. After anger, it's probably, it's one of the worst things that I deal with is just being really impetuous and wanting to speed up. Half the time when people are talking, I'm like, fast forward, you're speaking too slowly for me. It's really hard for me to function in this world. As it is, although now often I find myself asking the world to slow down a little bit and shut up and stop being so loud, which is partly why a couple years ago I just quit all of social media completely. So that was a very rambling answer to your question, James, but it was a very important question, and I
thought it was very good. It sounds like most of the things was stress related that came upon you, and you're dealing with it now, but you can get better with it, I think.
Absolutely.
But they tell me I'm crazy, so pay me no mind.
We're in good company, James.
Melody, do I have your permission to share your email with James?
Absolutely. With everyone. I would.
With everyone. All right. So when someone's talking, I'll be busy digging that up and putting it in the chat.
I'll type it in right now.
Oh, thank you. All right. Who's up next? Who has a question or a comment? Anyone?
Well, Sila in the chat says, Melody, I identify with much of what you have said. For example, it felt like I was being scorned for being my true self. Family turning against me, saying and treating me like I was crazy.
Yeah, I feel that. I feel that.
So yeah, tell us about how was your family supportive during the crazy period?
Actually, yeah, that's one of the greatest privileges I've had. At that time, in terms of when my husband and I have been married for more than 20 years now. So at that time, and he's the person I love more than anyone in the world, and for whom I want the best more than anyone in the world. So after I was diagnosed and I figured out what was wrong with me, in quotes, but I said to him, like, I wanted to leave myself. Like, if I could have left myself and divorced myself, I would have done it. Like, I 100% would have left myself. But I couldn't, right? Like, this is the human I'm stuck with, is who I am. He didn't have that obligation. And so I said to him, like, if I were you, I would leave me. And I wouldn't blame you at all. And his response to it was like very quick and very matter of fact. And he just said, I knew you were crazy from day one. This is not a new development. Like, that's nice that you think it's something new. It's 100% not something new, apart from the fact that now you have a diagnosis and like you have treatment and all these great things that are available to you that you didn't before. So like he's thought nothing of it. And that was really great. My parents were also very supportive, but very much from a Persian mentality of like, don't tell anybody. It would be better if people didn't know. Like, we were a very small community. And the idea was like, oh, we don't want, I mean, it's similar to like how a lot of parents deal with their queer kids. Like, we don't want you to suffer. So we're gonna so don't tell anybody. Like, so don't let anybody know. And it turns out like that silence, like asking somebody to be silent is not the same as asking them to be ashamed. But I do think that silence can induce shame. And that was not good for me. And when I told them I wanted to write about it, they were, already they knew like I was Iranian, I was Muslim, like you've written about these things, like how many minority statuses do you want to like invite the world to discriminate against you with? And so that was their perspective, was like, you don't need to share this with people. And my perspective was, especially at the time that I wrote the memoir about having bipolar, that was in the aughts. And people were not talking about it in general, but talking about it within my community was like absolutely not something people were doing. Nobody was like, there was no Instagram, TikTok, like that mentality of like wellness and all of that kind of stuff that also is a bit over the top on the other direction at this point. But there was none of that. So it wasn't until I sold my second book, Haldol and Hyacinths, the memoir about having bipolar, and I started making a living as a writer, that my parents were like, oh, you can actually make a living as a writer, because they didn't believe that you could do that. And usually in Iran, that's not something you can do either. In the US, it's hard. It's not like an easy thing to make a living as a writer. But when I sold that second book, I was able to start making a living as a writer. And that was very exciting to them. And they realized that like this was a different environment and that maybe I could make it with this weird brain of mine, which is just as much like an artist's brain as it is a brain of somebody, right, who has a mental health condition. Those things are very intertwined for me, as they are, I'm sure, with a lot of you as well.
Okay, we've got a backlog of questions and comments, but that's just in this brain. What about anyone else? Refried Bean, go ahead.
Yes, hello, Melody. I was wondering, do you write poetry also?
Not actively. I've written some poetry before. If I do write it, I usually will write it in Spanish, because it's not a language that I grew up speaking English and Farsi. Spanish is a language that I chose. And I feel more comfortable writing poetry in Spanish. It's a weird random thing, but I think one of my books has a poem in Spanish in it, and I don't even think I bothered to translate it, because I figure if you're in America, maybe you should look it up and learn. There's enough cognates in Spanish that you should be able to like gather a bit of it. But yeah, I don't write a ton of poetry. I have started a poetry collection that will absolutely go nowhere is my thought. And that's in English actually, and it's very weird. It was supposed to be about the 99 names of God, and it turned out to be really angry. It was supposed to be really lovey-dovey and Rumi-esque, and it just became really, really angry, and I don't know what to do with it. So that's a long answer to your question, but yeah, on and off. Genre is a weird thing, refried. Like it's a very weird thing to separate things into genres, and not something I really understood until I started teaching creative writing. That was a thing that people were very adamant about doing. Yeah. So great question. Thank you for that.
Great question, Refried. Thank you, Melody, for answering it. Martha, you have a question?
I do. So I'm in Southern California, and I also have a diagnosis of bipolar 1, and I've been hospitalized twice. And the biggest barrier that culturally that I have to confront is upper middle class white people who believe very much in wellness culture, very much to just a bizarre degree. And I think that, I mean, that's always been true. But this big cultural shift to Instagram mamas telling you that if you have the right, meds are given out like Pez, psychiatry is a scam, they're all out to get you, have the right supplement, do enough yoga. And it's like, and I went that
buy
way,
that supplement
and
from
I got
them,
hospitalized, it just doesn't work. Have you noticed a shift in the culture that way?
Yeah, I mean, it's capitalism run amok. It's not about anything that has anything to do with wellness. It has to do with, oh, if we call it wellness, then it applies to everybody. And if it applies to everyone, then we can profit from everyone. It's the same reason we saw when we saw like the rise in childhood bipolar diagnoses, right? Like that skyrocketed. And that was very much because, oh, the drug companies could make money off of lifelong clients, I guess, customers, consumers, that's what they call us now, right? That like the scary kind of thing to me is that there is always somebody who can profit off of you. And to just watch out for that is hard enough. But when they drape it in this, and I've seen them, they do it with spirituality as well, right? Like they'll drape the wellness in that, they'll drape it in all this other stuff. Like for me, like I'm not a good salesperson at all. I've never really been. And like the Rumi book that I read you from, like you don't need that book. You don't need any book. There's nothing that you need to connect yourself with a divine spirit more than what is already inside you. And that is what so many people forget because and especially as seekers, like we're always looking outside ourselves for something bigger and deeper. And the truth is you've always had it. It's always been inside you. And nobody can make money off of that, right? Like I remember I did an event where I want to say, this is public. See, this is the problem with having it like be live streamed and stuff like that. I did an event where somebody was like, oh, don't say that. Don't say they don't need your book. Or like, you're trying to sell a book. And I'm like, no, I'm trying to sell an idea. And like, yes, and I'm hoping the book is helpful and it's helped people. And I'm really grateful for that. But I'm more interested in ideas and helping other people in the way that I wish somebody had been there to help me as well. And it's very much like selfish because I'm trying to help myself in the past too. And it's a healing for me to be able to help somebody else in some way or another. But it's not a capitalistic enterprise in the same way. And that's what repulsed me so much about the Instagram and Facebook and like all of that culture. I had just absolutely had enough of it. And it was reinforcing delusions that that were comfortable delusions, right? But they weren't true. And if you're, I was a philosophy major in college. I've always been interested in ideas and thoughts and things like that. And if you're interested in truth and beauty and all those big, wonderful things, like you can't get that like through a Tide advertisement. Like it's just not something that you can get, again, outside of yourself. And this like hunt for outside of ourselves and not to say that I'm not guilty of it. Like I'm 100% guilty of it too. But I don't know. I definitely being off of all of that and not having the social media in my life has helped bring reality back to me in a lot of ways, which has been hard, but also really great. There's a lot of withdrawal associated with it because like those apps are meant to, and like give you floods of dopamine. And, if you don't have that in your life, then I guess you don't get those floods of dopamine. But I have plants, I have animals, I have like the world, the physical world I'm living in, my family and friends and stuff like that, which I feel like I've become more connected with post all of that. But anyway, Martha, I'm with you. The wellness stuff, like it's too much. It's too much and it's disingenuous and it has to go. And I honestly feel bad for a lot of those Instagram kinds of folks who are like, because they have to like film that how many times? Like it's hard work. I'm not saying it's not hard work. It's just like, and part of the reason I got off of it too is that somebody once said to me, I love your content. And I was like, oh, you mean my books? And they're like, no. Like your Facebook, you Twitter. And I was very into Twitter. And I was like, I really would like people to read my books. And maybe like giving them these little nuggets of things to read in between is not helping me or them. And yeah, so that was part of it too. I hope that answers your question.
It does. I just wanted to follow up just a tiny bit. There is the grift, but there is also the mindset that psychiatry is bad. I don't get in my personal life a lot of grift, but in Southern California, there's definitely a conspiracy view that psychiatry is bad and meds are evil. And I think it's been a relatively recent thing. And I have to correct people and check people kindly a lot. So, and that's exhausting. And I'm sorry you've had to do that on the Instagram.
Yeah, no, it is. And it's sad because the people who, and for sure, like everything has its good and bad, right? Like I'm not a huge fan of big pharma, but it saved my life. I can't like say that medication hasn't like literally saved my life. So being aware of that, like, and sure, the whole system is corrupt and all of that. But yeah, it is very hard when people are like, oh, psychiatry is garbage. And certainly parts of that, like parts of every field are garbage, but not all of it. Like throwing it all away is a really dangerous thing to do. And I wouldn't be alive if I had done that. And I think it's really important that you do correct them, Martha. So please keep doing that in Southern California because they need it for sure.
Yes. Thank you, Martha. And thank you, Melody. Tiffany, you have a question, comment?
Hi. No, I thank you for coming today. And, as I was listening, first thing I was thinking like, yes, Spanish, writing poetry in Spanish is fitting. It's just for poetry, it's just it gives you so much more to work with.
Absolutely.
And the way to elongate the meanings of one word in Spanish is just, yeah. And
I agree completely.
So, and then I'm thinking like, I'm hearing and I'm just posing some ideas now because I'm listening to the conversation with the wellness and the, I have a lot of ties to the SoCal community and I'm never a extremist for anything, but I'm wondering, right, like why that wellness becomes is so ingrained and so desired. I think I'm wondering if one reason, and this is honestly wondering, if one reason is because mental health care is so inaccessible and people need something, I mean, you want to talk to a therapist, if you don't have $160 a pop, then you're out there, paired with then if you even get mental health care through the county, it could be somebody who's, working on their degree, somebody, and everybody wants to help right now. I've had a lot of therapists and it's like, I get that you want to help, but you're not good at this, and so looking at all of the different barriers, and I can see how someone who has a debilitating mental health condition would want to seek some power within themselves. But I also understand how it can be a problem there with people, making money off of it as well, and it's such a dance. It's such a dance when I hear it and think about the gravity of that. I have a family member who has bipolar disorder, pretty heavy bipolar disorder, and is definitely taking herbs and meditating, and it's like that's not working out, but then on the flip side, when they are taking meds, it's not working out for them, so it's like, and I guess it's just one of those things where it's just such a conundrum for all of us, but I wonder if it, like I said, I wonder if it's become so popular because of, unskilled mental health workers, people not having access to mental health, even if they can get it. And I think why I'm rambling because it's a problem we're not going to solve in this conversation, I don't think.
No, you're not rambling at all. I'm so glad that you shared that. Yeah, no, I think we live in a country where our largest mental health facilities are jails and prisons, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's exactly where it comes down to it, right? This is where you're treating and throwing some of your most spiritually gifted people. You're throwing them either in hospitals or in jail. And I think there's something to be said about being spiritually gifted in some way. And there is a huge overlap when it comes to mental health and that. And in our current society where people are understandably moving away from faith, right? That used to be the thing that would sustain us. And I see this as an Iranian, right? As a Muslim, I thankfully did not grow up in the Islamic Republic version of Iran after I was born. And that is a theocracy, right? It's whenever you try and force religion down somebody's throat, nobody likes it. Also, you're wrong. There's literally there's a line in the Quran that says specifically that our only source of revelation says there shall be no compulsion in religion, right? And then this government, the most anti-Islamic thing is an Islamic Republic. And I see very much the same thing in terms of Christianity in the US, that politics has hijacked this beautiful faith that there's a reason it's the largest religion in the world. There's a reason that so many people find hope and faith and a lot of sustenance in it. And I saw this from the perspective of students. I worked in a program, in an MFA program, where I taught students, a lot of who had experienced spiritual abuse, who had been within the Christian community, a lot of queer students who were told that they were going to hell. They were not, something was wrong with them. Not that God made them this way and there's something beautiful about who they are, and that you exist in nature, in every form of nature. You are represented. Nobody bothered to say that to them. So a lot of them just sort of threw away Christianity, which is funny because I'm teaching them American literature. And I'm you can't throw away Christianity and understand American literature. Sorry, you need to know your Bible if you want to understand any of Western literature, honestly. And it was so sad to me that I eventually ended up handing out and I think I couldn't have gotten away with this if I were Christian, but I handed out all these red letter Bibles to be and they didn't even know. And some of these kids had gone to church for so long and they didn't know what a red letter Bible was. And I was so everything in red is what Jesus actually said. You're not going to find any of the garbage you heard in church in red. So go through all the red and see what you find. There's nothing but beauty there. And to lose that is losing a part of yourself. And that I think, because I've seen it happen in Iran with a lot of Iranians who deny Islam because they accept the government's version of what Islam is. And I would deny it too if I accepted the government's version of Islam, right? But to see it happening in the US too, and these are kids whose parents are pastors, who their family should know better, and understand that of all great religions, they do boil down to love in the end. And I'm not trying to minimize it. I'm just trying to be real, You
brought it there. You brought it there. And thank you for putting words to it, because when I think of my yoga practice, it's spiritual. It's not my body doesn't even allow me into asana right now because of the fact that it's not about that. And I think that so many times when people go into yoga, it's about asana, but it's the spiritual component for me. And I can say that through embracing the absolute just mystical, magical reality of spirituality, it has helped me with my mental health, you know. And that's not taking anything away from someone who has meds and things like that. So it's just like, gosh, there's so many answers. It's such a vast thing, and it's something where people are so passionate about everything, you know. But I definitely, like, I thank you for bringing up the Red Letter Bible and the spirituality, because those are things that, and not as it comes from man or from the government, but through your own like reality. I would say that there have been times when I've been having some psychotic moments where I saw something differently, you know. So it's a lot. It's a lot. And I'll just be quiet now.
No, please don't. I want to say like something about, like, I genuinely believe that those of us who live with mental health conditions, have access to different realms that other people do not have access to. And we are told that that's a disease. And it is. In this world, it's a disease. We can't function. Like, think about if you have no self, like the whole idea of Rumi is you have no self, the denial of the self, that we are all one, right? You can't function without an ego, like in this world, right? Because that's the way that we all live. So like, yes, I need medication for that. This realm will not accept that.
Thank you.
I will not be able to function that way. That doesn't mean that me being able to access those other realms was false. What it means is it's inconvenient in this current realm. And I feel grateful to have had access to a realm that I am at a point in my life now that if I cannot deny, like I used to be able to just theoretically like imagine the idea that there's no greater, what I call God or Allah or the divine, whatever you want to call the beloved. There's nothing bigger and greater than all of us that lives inside of all of us. Like, I can't believe that. I can't even entertain that intellectually anymore in ways that I used to be able to. And that's because of my psychotic break. That's because of the experience I had with mania and psychosis, which is, you know, something I would definitely like to not have had. But if that would have taken away my faith from me too, I would rather keep my faith. I would rather have that and also keep my Zyprexa, you know? Both of these things. I don't think I need to pick one or the other. And often the faith community makes us choose one and the medical community makes us choose the other. And we're not allowed to say, no, both of these things work and they work together really well in this realm. You know?
And real quick, I have to say, because the family member that I'm speaking about, like, I know my stuff. This family member is very spiritually gifted, like very, you know, and I can see how the gifts that he's navigating could really be a lot in this world. And I would hope that he would see the meds as maybe helping him balance this world a little bit, you know, because gosh, the way it comes to him is like, whoa, boy. And if you don't know how to get a hold of that steering wheel, that can really take you for a ride there, you know. So yeah. We have refried bean.
Thank you, Tiffany.
Yes, hello. I have another question, Melody, about being a writer and kind of public now with your books. Do you have to worry about like having another manic episode and like saying something? Do you have people who you think would like help it not be a problem or something?
That's such a great question. Yeah. And I think like it's funny, like, yes, to an extent I'm a public figure, but also to an extent all of us are public figures if you're on social media at all, right? And I do think with mania that becomes so dangerous because you'll say things, do things like, and I'm grateful that when I went manic, I wasn't really on social media. Like, it wasn't a big part of my life and it wasn't something that I was engaged in. But if it were, God knows what I ever would have written and said, you know? So like, I just, and that, like, that's one of the reasons I'm also grateful not to be on it anymore, just because it's not just if you're, you know, and I used to say this to my students is like, be careful what you do and what you say on these platforms, because what you believe today, if you are an enlightened human being, will not be what you believe 10 years from now necessarily. And if you're not open to the idea that your ideas and thoughts and beliefs will evolve and change over time, then I don't want to engage with you. Like, I'm definitely not interested in that kind of expression of humanity. And I think we've entered this expression of like, we're right, you're wrong, like there all these oddly enough bipolar kind of perceptions of like it's either A or B. It's like a very binary kind of mentality that is is dangerous. And I think it doesn't have to be mania that causes you to say things and do things that you could regret, right? But if you're a person who says like, of course, I'm capable of regretting things, like I'm not everything I've written or said is something that I will stand by for the rest of my life, per se. That's a weird thing in this day and age for people to accept. One of the things that happened to me shortly after I got off of all social media was I got an email from a woman who was reading the Haldol memoir, and she was really loving it. She had bipolar and she was Russian. And there's a part of that book where I talk about my husband used to date, he grew up in the Borscht Belt in upstate New York, and the women he used to date were Russian, and I used to call them all Natasha. I didn't know that Natasha is a pejorative or something. And so anyway, she wrote me and said, like, I was reading your book and I came across this racial epithet. And I was like, what? This racial epithet in the middle of my book? And she's like, well, you referred to all of his girlfriend as Natasha's. And I didn't know this, but it can be considered an epithet for an Eastern European sex worker. 100% was not part of my vocabulary or knowledge at all. I thought it was like a funny thing to include in the book. I'm not Russian at that time, especially being Russian in that, like, and this was like what, two and a half years ago. It must be really hard, right? Like, and the last thing I want is, and I've been that person who reads a book, gets to page 73 or whatever page she got to, and was like, wow, that's what you think of me? Like, I'm just pissed that's where it goes. And that's happened to me. And so I replied to her in like true sincerity, being like, I am so sorry. Like, this is not what and my husband was like, that's bullshit. Don't even bother with it. Don't even reply. And I was like, this is a valid statement. And I've been in that position where I felt like something somebody had written was an attack on my identity. And so what? If they didn't know it, like maybe they should know it, right? Like, and I'm glad that I know that. And if I knew differently, I would have written it differently for sure. And I told her that. And she was so gracious in her response. Like, had that interaction happened on social media, it would have been a shit show. It would have been a total nightmare. But for that to happen, like, is her writing a thoughtful, clear, well-spelled, like fully thought out email. And for me to like reply to it created this opening for understanding and repair and healing in a way for both of us. That she was open to it, I was open to it, and it made a really big difference. But that the platform matters is what I'm saying. Like, the place in which you have these discussions matter, and there are some places where deep discussions do not and cannot happen, which I'm so grateful for this venue, Dan, like that you've created this. And when you contacted me to speak, I was like, these are my people. Like, I 100% wanted to speak to y'all because of that, because we're in the same boat in so many ways. And I don't get the opportunity to talk to small groups of folks who are engaged in this sort of spiritual work with themselves and in community. So it is really great to be among all of you. And I'm grateful to you for inviting me to be here in the first place. So
thanks, Melody. And thank you,
I have a question.
Oh, of course, Liza. I was just going to get to what you said in the chat, but please.
I already forgot what I said in the chat, but can you tell me more about, you mentioned like if 9/11 hadn't happened, you don't think you would have had the whatever. So yeah. Could you go into that more, please?
Sure, absolutely. So I think we live in a world where, like, you know, our surroundings affect us as human beings, right? And when 9/11 happened, I had been very used to the world being ignorant about Islam, which is this like beautiful personal thing that, you know, obviously belongs to me and however 8 billion other people in the world. But I understand it differently, and it's a part of who I am. And then to see that part of who I am be used as justification for violence on many fronts was really painful. And I didn't know how to deal with it because it didn't happen to me. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't, like we were living in New York at the time, but it wasn't like I wasn't personally affected. Like I didn't lose anybody I loved. It wasn't a huge impact for me, but as a political event that changed the course of history, where Iran became part of what W called like an axis of evil, you know, and suddenly people saw it. Like it was one thing for people to be ignorant about Islam, but to be hateful toward Muslims, which is it's the second largest religion in the world. So it's like a lot of people, and to hate that many people without knowing them. And that was my first book was about young Muslim Americans. And the whole point of that book was to say basically like, we're not terrorists. And I interviewed a bunch of young Muslim, like really amazing young Muslim Americans I knew and wrote about them so that maybe Americans could like meet, you know, even if they didn't officially have any Muslim friends, they could say that they knew us, like they could get to know us in a way. And it becomes a lot harder to hate people once you know them and love them, right? Like it becomes a lot harder. And so had that event not happened in our like political timeline, I think, and it's so funny because like whatever those hijackers were trying to do was make life easier for Muslims. Like how many Muslims died as a result of that? Like life became a lot harder for Muslims all over the world as a result of that one event, right? And it just changed things, like the whole clash of civilizations arguments and stuff like that. This idea that like we were uncivilized, that like continues to this day, right? Like that's why Gaza is what it is. Like the things that continue thinking of us as being lesser than Black and brown people of the world, like and that's who we are. Like we're largely Asian and African, right? So, and to be associated with something like that in any way was hurtful, and especially to be told that like you're not from the place or of the place you're actually from, and to go back to your country when I was born in the US like is a painful thing to have happen. And to me, not just 9/11, but like everything that ensued after that was something that made it very hard. And increasingly, and I would say like at the time, I comforted myself at that time saying, it will never be worse than this for you. Like it'll never be worse than this. And it got worse than this. And I never anticipated that happening. I remember right after 9/11 happened that George W. Bush went to a mosque and said specifically, this is not Islam, and was doing his part to prevent any future hate crimes against Muslims, right? Setting aside everything that happened in Iraq and Afghanistan after that, he did this one thing that our current president would never do. What he would do is fan the flames and try and get more hate crimes to happen. And it did. Like in his previous presidency, we watched that happen, and all of the rise in hate crimes all around. And that's what like I try and choose love over fear as much as I can, but I'm in a moment right now, and I'm sure a lot of you are as well, where the fear is kind of intense. And I think pretending that doesn't have an impact on our mental health doesn't necessarily help us. Focusing on it too much doesn't either. But I would be remiss if I were just to mention 9/11 and not be like, hey, it is actually worse now than it was then. And I'm still in this state of like, I don't know what to do with this. This feeling of it being a really dangerous place for me and my family right now. Is the place where we sought refuge is now suddenly becoming dangerous for us. And obviously it's not just us, it's a whole lot of other people that this place has become, this alleged savior is now the place that wants to kill us. So that went a lot into it. You asked the question, but thank you for asking that question. I didn't mean to get all political, but there you go.
No, like I wanted to hear like exactly what you went through with 9/11. So what's your opinion about the now hatred of Jews? Because I'm Jewish, and my grandfather was an American soldier who jumped from a plane to fight the Nazis and was a prisoner of war for 2 years. So now, I've never experienced it in my lifetime. I never thought that that there would be another Holocaust, and there is. And in my country, there are October 7th, everybody watched on the news of the kidnapping, the burning, the rape, the running after people at a music festival and shooting. Sure. That was October 7th. October 8th, everybody is against the Jews, blaming the Jews.
Yeah.
Ever since, like kids who think they know.
I'm so glad that you brought that up. I think we've entered this like anti-Semitism 2.0 where it's a very different kind, and this happened before October 7th in terms of, again, like Trump fanning the flames of anti-Semitism and other sort of, and using that. And he of course used that, I mean, in a lot of ways as well, but using this argument of being like this, because there's one tragedy here, like two things can't be true at the same time, right? I feel like we're entering a place where that's a hard thing for people to understand or accept. And first and foremost, like whatever your genetics is, like must be amazing in terms of your grandfather. To that experience by itself is a book in and of itself. So I'm fascinated by that, and I give you all the respect there is. And I do think we have entered a state as a country where we've become so divided in the US, and I say that in the US, but also abroad, right? Like the things that are happening abroad are dividing us at home as well, and we're using them as excuses for hatred. And I think that has happened within all sorts of communities. Personally, as somebody within the Muslim community, I have seen a level of anti-Jewish hatred that I've never seen before. And I'm repulsed by it. I'm offended. I'm angry. And I feel like the shaking in your voice, I feel that, right? And I think that can absolutely be true. And I remember after the Tree of Life shooting happened, I went to, we were living in Cambridge at the time, and I went to an event that was a lot of it's not a synagogue, but like Harvard has this like Jewish center. And I went, and it was a lot of American Jews after this event being like, how do we deal with this? How do we cope with this? And my husband and I, who are both Muslim, like we stood up and we said, like, we know what it's like to have our community attacked. And I know that when my community is attacked, my voice gets shaky. I get at a point where my anger makes it so I'm not entirely rational. And I get at a point where the anger is like very hard to contain, and the emotion is very hard to contain. And that can be helpful to a certain extent, but it can also destroy me. It can burn me on the inside. And I said, I was saying to them, like, we don't want that to happen to you. Like, if what we can do to help you, you tell us and we will do it. And I think we need more of that. We need communities from supposedly opposite sides of whatever to come together and understand that, like, we know what it's like to be discriminated against, and you know what it's like to be discriminated against. And there are moments at which it becomes hard for you to stand up for yourself because of that. And there are moments that it becomes hard for me to stand up for myself because of that. This is a huge part of the reason I do so much work within the LGBTQ community, because, like, despite the fact that I'm cisgender and straight, right? Because I know what it feels like to be discriminated against. And I don't want that to happen to other people. And I don't want it to happen to other people based in my faith, right? Based in my background, and to use that as an argument to discriminate against people. But I think one of the things that we can do and have to do in response to that is to unite across different communities that have been historically pitted against each other. And I think Jews and Muslims are absolutely an example of that. And historically, we've been pitted against each other, despite the fact that both of us somehow realize you don't eat pigs. Like, I don't know how the Christians got to eat pigs all of a sudden, but we knew that this was not something that you ate. You know, I mean, I'm being lighthearted, but like, there's so many things that we have in common that bring us together more than tear us apart. And if we can use those things to bring us together, and humor as much as we can, and both of our communities have a entrenched history in that as well, I think it can be helpful, not just for like the other community, but for ourselves, to both get to know one another better, and to defend each other when people come after us, because sometimes that's the best person to defend, right? Because I can say to another Muslim, what the fuck are you talking about? The Quran says we made you of different nations so that you may know one another. That includes Jews, so that we may know them, not so we may hate them. So we are people of the book. We're both people of, like, there's things that I know from my background that I can talk to another Muslim and be like, what are you talking about? This is not an excuse to go hate somebody else. This is an excuse to unite with that somebody else. You know what I mean? Liza, did that answer any of your questions?
Well, I mean,
Sure.
yeah, I mean, like, there's differences of, you know, I'm not gonna get into any, you know, yeah, like political or terrorism, whatever. But the last part you said, like, it does remind me of my professor from grad school. He's very Jewish and like a very good guy of being a teacher of little kids with major disabilities and wheelchairs. And so he was in Crown Heights during the riots.
Awesome.
You're
Wow.
probably not old enough about it, but the Rebbe asked him to help break up the riots because it was like Blacks against Jews, and he used like music and basketball and having
Mhm.
the teenage Jews and teenage Blacks come and sit around the circle and talk,
Mhm.
and they ended up like uniting
Mhm.
through like the Jewish kids were like rapping, and they're all like doing music and playing basketball with each other, and like helped by getting the youth of the different sides together. So I'm sure like that's what he would do here. He's in Miami, but I'm sure like he sent me a video.
I mean, there are great people trying to do that work. But it's really hard when you have like government officials who are tearing it down. You know what I mean? When you have people in leadership who overstep their boundaries in terms of creating more divisions or fanning the flames of those divisions. And it's just up to us as humans to not let that happen. And it's hard. It's definitely hard, but I think it goes back to like the two things can be true at the same time, and that there's no like suffering is suffering, you know. And I no matter, you know, no matter who it's for or against, like you're for justice, right? And that both of our faiths teach that, you know. So anyway, I'm so glad that you brought that up, and you have my email in the long chat. I'll put it in again, but I'd love
put it in again. Thanks.
I'll put it in again, Liza. Thank
Maybe
you
we can work
that.
together and
Organize
create
a
something
Zoom.
like that.
Yeah. All right. Now, I would like to call on folks who haven't spoken yet, but who usually speak during a group. and they've been silent for, oh yes, that's you, Angela. That's right. Go ahead, Angela. Did Angela pop off? I hate when people pop off. All right, let's see. Who else do we got here? Oh, Mika. Go ahead, Mika. You have been silent this whole time, but you've been around. What's on your mind?
I don't really have any questions or anything.
You have any comments?
No, no comments at the moment. I'm just listening.
Well, how you doing, Mika? How's life? How you feeling?
Better. It feels like every time I get better over the weekend, and then I get sick during the week.
Oh.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm doing well though. Thanks for asking.
All right, Mika. No problem, Mika. All right, let's see who else we got here. Now, I know Sila has problems with her computer. So what about, oh, Bonnie, go ahead, Bonnie.
I don't know how to get myself back.
It's okay, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Oh, you can?
Yes.
Well, I loved everything you were talking about because it connected to this week. I was in a Bible study of a bunch of old ladies like me. And I said to the teacher, well, the 10 Commandments are in different places, also in the Quran. And she said, oh, I doubt that. And all the women around the table were like, that can't be. They are. So the teacher went and looked it up. And we know what politics tells us to believe about other faiths and ways of living. And the same thing is true about psychiatry. And a lot of it's not based on personal experience or how things really are. I loved your example of the red letter Bible. I had forgotten about that. Somebody saying that wasn't what they were listening to preachers preach, which usually is everything now is, seems to be not about trying to get at truth, but pushing a point of view or a way to make money.
Yeah, no, you're so right about that. Like it's about views and attention, right? Like how many people you can get to listen or watch whatever it is you're doing. But it turns out like it's not provocative stuff.
Yes, you could take off all your clothes and get a lot of viewers. Does that mean you need a bunch of followers? I don't.
Exactly. Yeah. No, so true. So true. Thank you, Bonnie.
It's okay if we lapse into silence. That just means that we're absorbing everything. Cecilia, did you get my text in the chat? Oh, wait, Angela, are you there, Angela? Let me ask you, Angela, unmute yourself, please. Let me help you out. Angela is a very deep and wise person.
I don't mean to be rude, but I am not in the mood to talk. I'm having a lot of problems with my phone this morning. But I'm listening.
Are you sure, Angela? We'd love to hear what you have, what's on your mind.
Yes.
Oh, I was into Rumi for a long time. His poetry. That was like about 40 years ago.
That's awesome, Angela. Well, I'm sorry, and I'm glad you're here. So thank you for being here. At this moment, I would like to check in with everyone and see how you are feeling in this moment. I'll start with Chaplain James.
I'm feeling motivated.
Very, very awesome. I couldn't agree more. Frank, how do you feel in this moment in time?
I'm fine, thanks.
Good. Thank you, Frank. And Sila, if you can go ahead and type in the chat how you're feeling in this moment, I will get to you in a second. And Aisha. Oh, you just walked away. But when you're back, we'd love to hear from you and how you're feeling. Refried Bean, how are you feeling in this moment?
I'm feeling really happy. This is like a really happy treat for me, and I'm so excited. And Melody, I might email you sometime.
Yeah, no, that would be great.
I have one more question.
Go ahead. Let me, one of the things I did want to respond, and then we'll get to your question, is to Mika. Because what you said about the weekends and the week and what ends up happening, I feel you. And I didn't want that to go by without saying something about it. And that is that, like, we underestimate the power of rest and quite how much of it we need. As a creative person, like we live in a culture that's like so about productivity, which is great, you know, and it's usually to feed capitalism. It's not to like productivity for the sake of helping people, or like, it's not, but it's that idea and that mentality is hurting us. It's literally killing us. And if you can take, what the weekend is like literally labor unions fought for that, because we needed it physically, emotionally, like to have some time off. And at a moment where unions are under attack, like all of that may seem irrelevant. All of that, like, no, that is like the water in which we're swimming. They want to take so much away. And the idea of being able to rest in an environment where someone is taking away your health care, being able to rest in an environment where someone is taking away your job, and like that kind of thing. And I literally like have friends and family who are losing jobs right now and losing livelihood, like just can't take care of themselves. And it has nothing to do with them being like incapable or whatever. It has to do with the society we're living in, you know? And I think acknowledging that society is insane, and way more insane than any of us could ever be, is something worth doing. Not to just like complain, but to acknowledge that what's happening to you on the weekends is like totally appropriate. Like that is exactly what would happen to a lot of us, and does happen to a lot of us, because we don't get enough rest. And we need that in order to be functional and creative. Like no matter what your diagnosis is, like you need that as a human being to function. And to dismiss it is to do all of us a huge disservice. So I just wanted to thank you for bringing that up. And I'm keeping you in my prayers, because like I feel that to my bones.
Oh, thank you. I just want to clarify that I was actually like sick with a cold. Because I work with kids, and so whatever was going on, but I appreciate the reminder for rest, because this is a new industry for me. And I see how it's amazing, the productivity thing in healthcare, and how people are expected to just come to work no matter how they're feeling because of the lack of insurance and things like that. So it's really interesting. So when I say I'm like, I do try to rest over the weekend, and then just my client this week was like literally coughed in my face. And then I'm like, but yeah, I mean, I do have other situations going on in my life that I do rest from. But in terms of like my physicality, it was like literally having the cold and having a cough, and trying to definitely balance that out. It's definitely new for me, and we definitely do need a policy of like, if you're sick, just don't come to work for 2 weeks and allow yourself to get better, rather than as soon as you can breathe and you're able to walk, then you're like expected to go back and like take care of other people. So it's really amazing. I feel how being of service to people is so under appreciated in so many different ways. So yeah.
Well, So true. Yeah, I actually I normally don't have such a sexy voice. I also I don't know what it was, but the day before yesterday, I woke up with a really bad sore throat, and I actually just took a COVID test. It's not COVID. I don't know what it is, but we don't, something might be going around. But the truth is, like, if you don't take that time to rest for yourself, and like obviously, I think this is what's happening to me, is if you don't take that time, your body will do it for you on its own time schedule. And I think that can happen to all of us. So in any case, thank you for sharing that.
Yes, thank you, Mika. I was gonna say I was on to you because you work with the kiddos. So I was gonna say, oh goodness, they are so, they're still learning to cover their mouth and things like that. So I hope my prayers are with you too. Thanks, Melody. And Refried Bean, you had a question, you said?
Yes, if you don't mind, it's kind of a reality check for my own mental illness. And the question is that I start having paranoia sometimes whenever there's a problem. I wonder if it's the jihad in disguise. And like for random stuff, like there was a fight in an airport in Atlanta, and and then that plane crash in the Potomac. I was like, can I ask you, do you think that sounds like mental illness, Islamophobia, or is it true? Or like, do you think that it could be?
Yeah. Sure. Do you know what the word jihad means?
Actually, some of what I learned was from your book, War on Error.
Okay.
That like some of it I think it's like a fight against your own worst side. Yeah. And then some of it is like the holy war, but that's all I know.
Yeah, so the thing about, there's nothing holy about war in Islam. So that's the way it's frequently mistranslated, which is why I asked. And that the word just means struggle, and it's the struggle to maintain faith in a world where it's often hard to do so. And it's largely an internal struggle. It's also a struggle against oppression. And when I say largely internal, it's against the ways in which we oppress ourselves, right? The way we internalize certain things and turn them against ourselves, like, because that's the worst thing you can do to yourself, right? Like racism out in the world is okay, we're expecting it, it's there. But when you internalize it and turn it in on yourself, or colorism or whatever, right? You turn it on yourself and it eats at you and you don't know why, right? Like that's the essence of jihad, is fighting that oppression. And the Quran like specifically teaches that oppression is worse than killing. So what that ends up being is pretty much identical to American law, in the sense that there is a self-defense if you're being attacked is permitted, right? You're not expected to just get attacked. There's no notion within Islam of, and I think it's a beautiful notion, but we don't have it, of turning the other cheek. It's very much a notion of fighting oppression, whether it's against me or the person sitting right next to me. And that is actually the same thing when it comes to American law. So if you're trying to kill me and I kill you, that's a justified self-defense, right? And if you try and kill someone who's standing next to me and I kill you, that is also a justified defense of others. So that's how I see jihad in terms of being identical to American law. So it's not the most merciful reaction, although mercy is like something that's highly valued. It's also acknowledged that there is oppression in the world that we're living in, and it is justified to defend yourself and others from that oppression. And I that's where that's coming from. And when you talk about paranoia, I think it's easy to latch on to words and concepts and ideas that the media portrays. And so I don't think that's on you. I think that's on how the media portrays certain things. And I think even the idea that you asked, is this Islamophobia, is like very positive in terms of probably not Islamophobia on your part. Probably that the fact that you could engage that idea and that concept, to me, means like, I don't consider you a threat on that end. Like I wouldn't worry about that. I would worry about yourself. Like I think primarily fighting paranoia is something that like I think all of us deal with. But, you know, as Malcolm X said, like, it's not paranoia if they really are out to get you, right? Like, if they really are, it might not be paranoia. And there's a lot of people who are out to get us in terms of taking away our healthcare right now, and taking away our basic human rights. And that to me is not paranoia, especially if you can learn to channel it. That said, there are certain things that if those of us who are prone to it need to do to take care of ourselves. And some of that might be, you know what, I don't read the news or listen to the news. Oh, if that makes me a horrible person, great. You know what, I don't need to be paranoid right now. Like, it makes me a better person to not engage in that. And the me knowing about what's happening doesn't necessarily resolve things either, right? Like if I were Secretary of State, it would be a different story, right? Like I would be important to know what's happening everywhere in the world at this moment. But to know what's happening everywhere in the world at this moment, just so you can be paranoid about it, doesn't help you or anybody else, right? That was a great question, Refried.
Thank you, Melody. Did you know that Malcolm X's mom was schizophrenic? He got
Yes,
removed
I
from her.
do.
Yeah.
She was in a mental hospital in Kalamazoo. Yeah. Yeah, but we're not sure what she had because the government took away all her children. So it was a foster care system that took away all this Black woman's children, killed a society that killed her husband, that murdered him and called it like her husband was killed. He was run over by a train. So I don't think she was crazy. I think she was reacting to a society in a very positive, like rational way, for her at the time. And she was actually really smart. And yeah, I mean, if your husband were killed by the KKK, I don't know what I would do, but probably, I mean, I don't know. Hopefully I'd become like Malcolm X. So yeah, Aisha.
Yeah, just so Molly, I don't know you, but years ago when I was a child, after my father died, my father had been member, I'm of the nation, a different sect within the Risen Islam, somewhere in New York. I'm not saying where because I don't know what's going on. But I remember one thing when you said his mother was Christian. I was like, what? I never knew that. I thank God I have relatives and people around that care about me. But I'm like, you know, you're nice. Even though I have my illness, it's not just my illness. I believe in God. Like I don't have it. I always say, God, you're with me. You know, the good days, bad days, and I'm an adult. I'm just keep going. And it's good seeing you. I don't know you well, but when you said his mother has schizophrenia, well, was it actually the clan that killed Malcolm X's mother, or you're not sure?
It was, yeah, it was. I mean,
oh my God.
Yeah, it's the beginning of the autobiography of Malcolm X. If you read it,
no, I'm not. That's a little too heavy for me. I'm stick with the, you know. But it's good seeing you. My father, like my father, like a few people I had in my life, my family members and my father had a friend, right? And he was nice. He was a little Mexican, but he was someone that knew he was in my life. But I thank God because I know He's with me. No matter what people say, man, that's what you said. I know my God is with me. And it's good to see you as well. I know you're Arab, right? If I know where you're from, was just Arab American.
What was that?
You don't mind me asking, what country are you from? Arab American?
Oh, I'm from Iran, so I speak Farsi, but I speak Arabic enough to pray. I mean, I can pray in Arabic.
Yeah. Oh, I like it. But it's good to be on. Hope everybody has a good. It was nice to also be a talker and close out one. But thank you.
Thank you, Aisha.
Thank you, Aisha. Thanks for being here, and thank you, Refried. Thanks, Melody, so much for being here. I'm just going to continue on with Martha. How are you feeling at this moment?
Sorry, I'm wrangling in my cat here. I feel greatly. She's the best. I feel greatly affirmed. I always like hearing from a creative person with my same diagnosis say something like, oh, people talk too slow, because they just do. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. And Silas says, this is the best I felt all week. Thanks for being here, everyone. Especially listening to you, Melody. I identify so much with what you are saying. Thank you, Sila. And Tiffany, how do you feel in this moment?
I feel pretty good. I'm enjoying the meeting. I'm glad we're having such a good discussion. And I don't I don't know how he's seen in the Islamic community, but I listened to one they call him what is it called when they're is it it's not a sheikh. What is it?
Sheikh is like a guru. Guru and sheikh are interchangeable.
Is that what he is? Yeah,
Who?
Mufti Menk from Zimbabwe.
Mhm.
I really like him. I don't know if you listen
What's
to
his
Mufti.
what's his so Mufti what? What was the name?
MENK.
Menk. I'm not familiar. I'm gonna look him up.
Yeah, he's out of Zimbabwe. I listen to him a lot. And you know what? He even keeps my 12-year-old's attention. So he must be good.
Oh, I'm gonna check him out. Like on YouTube, or how do you listen to him?
He's on YouTube. He's on YouTube. And so far I haven't found any scandals. He did make one comment and he publicly fixed that, because you have to be careful with religious leaders, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
So because he's very charismatic, so I had to look into him a little bit there, you know. But yeah, no, Islam is definitely there's so much beauty in Islam. So I thank you for reminding us to look into that, as there is so much beauty inside of Judaism. They're both just such beautiful religions. And this is coming from the outside here, such beautiful practices and so much tradition that we can apply to ourselves. So thank you for bringing that reminder to us today.
A couple late, but it's okay. Nothing laches here. I might take a little.
Helen is here. That's nice. And Bonnie, how do you feel, Bonnie, in this moment?
I don't know how to get my picture back, but you can hear me, yes?
Yes.
Your picture's still there.
Oh, okay. I know, but not the real one.
Okay.
I feel much better than I did this morning. I have a struggle in learning to rest without blue light, without YouTube, without listening to news, which people used to do. They had a day of rest, whether it was on Saturday or Sunday or Friday night. And somehow that's not about productivity and all the things we've come to treasure. And I realize when I do turn everything off, that I'm able to think myself instead of just having an opinion about what I heard, if that makes any sense. And I've lost that ability, I think, because of it. Nobody did it to me.
Yeah.
It's just the media is always there in so many forms.
I think we all have lost that ability, Bonnie. I think that's such a great point. In so many ways, we've lost that ability as a culture.
Yes. Thank you, Bonnie. And Liza, are you still with us? Or how do you feel, Liza, in this moment?
Great. I'm inspired. I've also been putting off writing my book, and I'm bipolar too. So I'm also bipolar. So yeah.
Looking at your photo, Liza.
It's old. I don't.
A friend, you look a lot like a friend of mine from college. Her name is Sarah Chandler. And I don't know why I'm going to tell you this, but I'm going to tell you. She wrote a book that's called Ophelia Speaks. It's a beautiful book. Her mom wrote a book about being Ophelia's mom, but she wrote a book called Ophelia Speaks. It's a beautiful book if you haven't read it. Anyway.
Well, first I'll check out your books.
You're sweet.
Oh, and where do you live in the world?
I live in Tallahassee, Florida now.
Oh,
I used to
okay.
live in Wilmington, North Carolina, but we moved here last year. My husband teaches at Florida State.
So do you know any good Persian restaurants in New York? Did anyone tell you any?
So there aren't as many in New York. LA is full of them. Atlanta actually has a great Rumi's Kitchen. And I think that actually has opened up in LA now. But there are Persian restaurants in New York. There's an Afghan restaurant in New York we overlap a lot. Just like, people who are very similar tend to fight and say they're not the same. But no, a lot of the food from Afghanistan and Iran is similar. So there is, and I forget what it's called, but there is at least 2 good Persian restaurants in like actually in Manhattan.
Great, thanks.
No problem. I think the better ones are out in like Queens.
Oh yeah, I'm from
then-
Queens originally.
yeah.
Okay, makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah. And Mika, how are you feeling in this moment, Mika?
I think I'm feeling stirred, I guess. There's a lot of thoughts going through my mind in terms of, yeah, like everything that we talked about this morning. And I think I guess the primary thought that's staying with me is how, I don't know, which is why I joined this group too. It's like how our everyday experiences are like misinterpreted, and then how like colonization turned, this negative image of people who think differently, and it's just kind of like, no, we all have these like ways of seeing and speaking, and sometimes, I don't know, a lot of creative people and people who speak differently actually have this kind of spiritual connection that's easily accessible than like what we would call like typical. So I'm learning this, like in my job, I'm learning like these different labels, because I work with kids diagnosed with autism. And so I have learned different labels like atypical and typical.
Right.
And the more I'm like, I really think it's backwards.
Yeah.
I really think it's backwards. And so, yeah, it just makes me, I feel really, just a lot of thoughts going through my mind right now. And I enjoyed this discussion. So
How great for those kids to be able to be like taught and helped by somebody who says, I really think it's backwards. Like think for how many decades, centuries, like they've been taught and communicating with people in levels of authority who told them like, no, there's something wrong with you, versus like, no, there's maybe something wrong with the world you're in. How amazing is that?
Yeah, that's pretty incredible. Thank you, Mika. Thank you, Liza. I didn't thank you. That's really great. We're coming to an end at the time. How are we on time, Dan? You're muted.
We're just a little bit over.
We're just a little bit over. So I wanted to quote Rumi. The wound is the place where the light enters you. When your intentions are pure, the universe will part ways for you. Being at ease with not knowing is crucial for answers to come to you. You can never cross the ocean until you have the courage to lose sight of the shore. Kindness is a mark of faith, and Allah does not burden a soul beyond that it can bear. I love that. Thank you so much for being here, Melody. You've been really great, very inspiring.
Thank you so much for having me. Y'all have been great. Thank you.
All right, we'll see everyone next week, and we have more guest speakers, more exciting topics, and you're all invited. All right, bye guys.
Thanks, Dan.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.